it's Leah from Crafty Bananatee, and welcome to a very special episode of Polymer Puns, where I make silly puns out of polymer clay. So a while ago, I made this little marshmelephant, but he felt too simple. I wanted to go bigger, better, dare I say, badder? That's right, it's gonna get dark. So we're gonna ditch this guy and make a full-on marshmelephant diorama. I start all my larger pieces by making a foil armature that I smack into shape with an acrylic roller. I then covered this in thin sheets of clay and smoothed it out to make the marshmallow head of our first marshmelephant. There's gonna be 4 in total, 2 alpha marshmelephants and 2 beta. You'll see what I mean. This one's an alpha, by the way. I stuck on a cone of clay for the trunk and blended the seams. Because he's one of the alpha marshmelephants, he gets a smile. I smeared on some liquid clay with my silicone tool to stick the ears on. This marshmelephant is going to be eating a s'mores marshmelephant, so I wanted to make it look like he had some of it in his mouth. I ended up having to take one of the ears off so I can blend it on better, but I just popped it back on after. I made some twisted wire so I could use it to securely attach the head to the body. This was so satisfying to make. Using twisted wire makes it thicker and helps make the clay stick to it better. I ended up sticking them together after they were baked, but I'll use the wire later anyways. I added this footage just so I can make a joke about how it's hard to get it in the hole. That was it. That was the joke. Anyways, moving on. Next, I made the body by covering the foil with clay just like I did with the head. Oh wait, maybe this was the footage I was gonna make the joke with. I cut the wire shorter, put some liquid clay between the pieces, and put the head on before baking both parts together. I rolled out some stubby little arms and attached them to the baked body using liquid clay. I then blended everything together using my silicone tool and my finger. Since this guy is going to be holding the s'mores, I had to bake his arms in the correct position while still being able to remove the s'mores for painting. Looks like we have a guest joining us. I used some more liquid clay and blended on a little tail. Next, I added the chubby little marshmallow feet. I baked everything again before adding the little floof at the end of his tail. Then I used my needle tool to create little hairs. The thing about drawing on features before painting is that you cover it up with the paint and it's like, what's the point? So what I do is paint a layer, draw a layer, paint a layer, draw a layer, etc. See, you can still see his eyes. So next I painted on some more white paint, let it dry just enough to be tacky, and then used a yellow pan pastel and a dry brush to give him the perfect marshmallowy toastiness. At least in my opinion, I hate burnt marshmallows. I originally wasn't going to toast the big marshmelephants, but I figured if they're sitting in front of the fire, there's bound to be some collateral damage. Next, I used the world's smallest paintbrush to paint on the eyes. And once this guy was done, I made him a little buddy. No one should go camping alone. Now it's time to work on our victims, or what I call the beta marshmelephants. I'll be making a s'mores one first. I made the graham crackers and baked them separate from the fillings, but I'll put them together at the end once everything is painted. After we put the dots on, it's time to take a bite. I know I said the graham cracker is already pre-baked, but I put it on the marshmelephant just to make sure everything was the correct size. Aw, look at his teeny tiny trunk. Just remember, little guy, the size of your trunk doesn't matter, because you're getting eaten anyways. Next, I used some little wires to make sure the ears stayed on. It just gives it a little extra support. I lined up the pre-baked graham cracker and the marshmelephant so I can make the bite marks match. I baked the marshmelephant separately so I can paint him white without having to worry about getting it on the graham crackers. And then I toasted him the same way I did the alpha marshmelephants. Then it was time to give him some eyes. Rest in peace, little dude.
Why, Mother?
Don't mind him, he's just overreacting. So I painted the graham cracker in one all-over color, and then I used the pan pastels to shade the edges so it looks like it was baked. Next, I mixed some liquid clay with shaved brown chalk pastels to make it look like melted chocolate. Then I added the top graham cracker on and baked them together. And then after they were baked, I glued on the bottom graham cracker. Now it's time for beta marshmelephant number 2. This guy is getting roasted, and not in the fun Comedy Central way.
Boom. Roasted.
To make Roasty McToasty, that's his official government name, by the way, I just followed the same steps as the s'mores marshmelephant, with one big difference. Small children, please look away. What's the matter, kid? You gotta stick up your butt? Now that Roasty McToasty has been deflowered, it's time to paint him white. I used the same yellowy pan pastel from the s'mores marshmelephant and then layered on a darker brown pastel. And then because he is Roasty McToasty, he gets some black dry brushing on top. Very toasty. My plan for Roasty is to actually make him on fire, so he gets a very concerned face. Next, I'll be making a tree stump from one of the alpha marshmelephants to sit on. Whenever I make something bulky, I always start out with a ball of foil. Once the shape is right, I started attaching roots and other little bits and bobs. I don't know why, but at this point I felt like trying out other blending tools I hardly ever use, and in the end, I came back to my one true love. In the background, you can see the base I'm going to be using for this diorama. I built a very basic 3D model in Tinkercad and used my 3D printer to bring it to life. But back to the tree trunk, I used my blending tool to create some texture marks so it looked more like a tree, because obviously we're going for realism in this Marshmelephant diorama. Once it was baked, I primed it white and then painted it all one shade of brown. This will be my mid-tone color. Then I brushed on a darker wash that will sink into the texture marks we made earlier. I used a towel to dab off the excess, so most of the darkness is in the cracks. Next up is the dry brushing, which will really bring this dead tree to life. I put a tiny bit of paint on my brush and wiped most of it off on a towel. Then I lightly brushed it on, being sure it only hits the raised parts, except the top of the stump, which I mostly covered in the light tone. But now it's time to work on the base. I did some math to figure out where I want to put my campfire. Then I drilled a hole in the middle. Did I mention this is going to light up? The hole is so I can fit a tea light into it. I primed the base white with the intention of painting it, but I found this mini AstroTurf type thing and thought I'd give it a shot. I poured on a generous amount of tacky glue and brushed it on with this silicone brush. Let me tell you, when this brush dries and you get to peel the glue off of it, so freaking satisfying. I put on the AstroTurf and stuck something heavy on it while it dried. I wanted this to look more like dirt with grass patches here and there. The instructions for the turf said you could apply water and then scrape off the grass. I feel like it wasn't as easy as it sounded, and I ended up with a lot of nasty, wet grass goop. Eventually, I gave up because I'm gonna put dirt on it anyways. For the fire, I airbrushed some polyfill stuffing to give a red, yellow, black gradient, or I tried to. I think it came out a little too stripey, but whatever. My airbrush was acting up and kept getting clogged, and it was just a pain. I deem this good enough. I bought some twigs at the craft store, which, in hindsight, I could have just found outside. They were a little too long, so I had to chop them with my snippers. To prepare for the campfire, I attached the tea light to the bottom of the base with some E6000. I got this spray glue at the craft store and started pouring on my dirt. I used a coarser, rockier dirt for under the campfire, and then used a mix of lighter and darker dirt for the other patches. I tried to make the patches seem organic and random, but why is it so hard to be random? I feel like whenever there's an art project that requires something to look random, it's so hard not to create some sort of pattern. Does anyone else have that problem? Moving on though, I hot glued the cottony fire to the base and then started hot gluing the sticks to my fire. Looks pretty good. Let's do a light up test. Hell yeah. This time I actually sourced my materials from the great outdoors. I laid my rocks down in a circle before gluing them down permanently. Then I used some more E6000 to glue on my alpha marshmelephant on his tree stump. Originally I was going to drill a hole in the bottom of alpha marshmelephant 2 to make him more secure on the base, but I decided to spare him and just use more glue. Speaking of sticking stuff up the butt, it's time to add Roasty McToasty. Help me! Next I gave the other alpha marshmelephant his snack. Roasty McToasty then gets a fiery new hairdo. I finished off the base with some more rocks and grassy bits, and then it was done. I hope you enjoyed watching, and if you did, please consider liking the video and subscribing to my channel. Without further ado, I present to you Marshmelephant Massacre. You enjoyed this extra large polymer pun. Also, if you're interested, I do sell most of my puns at craftybananatee.etsy.com. The link's down below. Thank you again for watching, and if you have a pun you'd like to see me make, or even a food or animal you'd like to see punified, let me know in the comments.